You're listening to the Awaken Broadcast with Cecilia Angel, a space for embodied awakening, honest human conversation, and a living, breathing connection to God's source. This is your invitation to awaken. Welcome back to the Awaken Broadcast. I am so grateful to be here with you once again. Woo-wee. Creation is such a process. You feel me? I don't know about you. I know that some people that are watching this broadcast are creators, visionaries, people with a mission. I feel you and I see you. Especially when we are creating based on what something so much greater than we are wants to create through us. When we are sourcing from a greater vision, we are sourcing from a greater consciousness, when we are sourcing from God itself. This is a totally different way of living and operating. This is not your average experience of life. When you are choosing to create hand in hand, heart in heart with God's source, your life is going to be very unconventional, very unconventional. And that creation will guide every moment, every breath. Creating this podcast, this broadcast has been the most so far. I mean, what are we on? Episode 6? Already, this broadcast has turned my life upside down backwards in the best of ways. In the best way. It has been challenging me. It has been purifying me. It has been calling me forward. And all I hear from God is, girl, just be yourself. Be yourself as I created you. Release your masks. Release your judgments. Release your worries about who sees you being whoever and doing whatever. Drop the bullshit. Drop the bullshit. And yes, that's happening here when I sit down in front of the camera and I start to record, but it's happening in the mundane in-between moments. I'm watching this creation completely reroute the way that I show up in my relationships, in my day-to-day, in the way that I do little micro things, those little micro moments in the in-between. Because this creation is the most important creation, and now everything else in my life is reorienting to best benefit how I show up here, and how I show up here is what best benefits the way I show up outside of here. Does that make sense? It's also been cool because God has been reorienting. Oh God, this is so good. God has been reorienting my relationship with my business and my work, giving me a green light to take some pressure off, pressure that I didn't realize was there because I had been trying to do it a very specific way for so long and trying to play a game that wasn't a game for me to play. This feels like the main primary pillar of my work, which is just a different way of showing up online because I love showing up online. I mean, you heard the story. If you've been following this broadcast, if this is your first time showing up to this broadcast, welcome. Hi, my name's Cecilia Angel. I'm so grateful that you're here. Welcome to my world. But if you've been following my story, I've been telling my story, and I'm going to continue to tell my story today. If you've been following my story, my awakening, or when God revealed my purpose to me, God showed that it would be a pillar that I would have to reach through the internet. That this beautiful resource, can we just pause on that? This resource, magnificent resource that we all have access to, game-changing, this. The fact that you are listening to me right now. And all I did is I sat down here in my room. I hit record. Wasn't even hard, but I get to broadcast myself to you because I say so. Nobody else is in charge of this creation. It's just me. I'm the boss. I'm the boss. And meanwhile, because I'm doing that, I get to broadcast myself to you, and maybe you get to find value. What? That's the reality we be living in, that we have that level of connection and communication. I know that there's so much crunch around the internet. It's funny, I saw a meme, I'm going to totally butcher it. I should just never ever quote a meme because I butcher it every time, but I'm still going to try. It was saying like people in 1999 were escaping reality through the internet, and now people in 2026 are escaping the internet through reality. Ooh, yes, that's the world I want to be. Finally, the internet has created such a pressure cooker on us that we're going out and raw dogging real life. It's cool now to go and leave the house for hours without your phone. It's cool now to be present with one another. Motherfucking finally, dude. get your face out your phone. However, the relationship that we get to have with technology on the other side of that realization of, oh, it's actually not healthy to be as zoned in to the internet and our phones and technology as we have been, is that we actually get to cultivate an intentional relationship with technology. We get to slow down and make a choice, a conscious choice in how we engage with content, whether that's content like long form content like a podcast or content on Instagram, which requires way more intention. I will do an entire episode on how to bring more intention to social media, because this matters to me. As much as I have to rely on the internet to do what my Dharma asks of me, what God asks of me, I have to use this as a resource. Because of that, I have cultivated so many ways to amplify my time outside of this. And right now, my life is taking a turn through this broadcast where I'm going to have so much more space and time away from my phone, because primarily my business has been run through Instagram up to this point. And that's been cool, but I don't want that because it's so fast food. It's so quick. I'm not a 3-minute girly. That's why I have a podcast. I actually am super slow. I don't know if I've said this before. I might have. Forgive me. I repeat myself. I think it's part of my design. I repeat things so that it really lands. Especially as a teacher, I find myself repeating myself a lot. But my spirit animals are a snail and a blue whale, and there's nothing fast about any of that. If you are in my work, I talk about slowing down all the time. Go slower than you want to go. This is just the way that I am. And so Instagram, although it has been so beautiful and I'm going to continue to use that resource, Instagram is great. This is my main hub. And this is so much slower, and I can now put more of my energy into this. I don't have to be making fast food content, which that makes me so happy. That makes me so happy. That's exactly what I want. Woo! Then Instagram can be secondary. This is number one. This is number one. This feels like so me. This is so me. Yes. So I'm coming into alignment with my desires, my soul's desire and the desire that God has for me, which is for me to be able to, with integrity, invite you to go out and enjoy real life, which is part of my core mission. I need to have the space in my life to be enjoying real life too. And because I have been operating primarily through Instagram, which is so quick and fast, I haven't been able to fully lean in to the desire to be living a much more slow pace. I'm married. I want to be a mother. I don't want work to be primary. I want to serve you, and I want to serve you well, and that matters to me. But I want to be able to spend so much time. When I become a mother, I want to be able to give them so much presence. And so I'm building a life that allows for that, and I'm showing you how to do the same. So that's why I'm so excited about this broadcast, because it gives me more spaciousness in my life. And I have created a world of service for you so that you can come in and you can receive from me, while I also get to be here leaning back into the grace of God. Finally, finally, after 15 years of deep work. And if you've been following my story, then you already know. So today I'm tired. I have been so tired because so much has been reorienting. I just came out of something called 90 Days of Peace. 90 Days of Peace was something that was ordained by God. I didn't go looking for this, but God came through and said, 90 days. The joke in this is that I don't know when it started and I didn't know when it would end. It was pure faith in God. God said, for 90 days, you're going to completely unhook from all your current relationships. You're going to completely detach and bring all those threads of your power back into yourself. You're going to pour it back into yourself. And you're going to lean back and have faith in me that by the end of this 90 days, and you will know, I'll make it very clear when the 90 days is over. At the end of this 90 days, all of your relationships, all of your current relationships, the ones that are going to proceed with you, will be completely rearticulated. And I will put any new energy that is ready to come into your life. So can you trust me? Can you trust me? And honestly, at that point, I was in such a place of exhaustion and surrender. I had I'm not going to talk about it today, but I had a big year in 2025 relationally, and it was very challenging and honestly traumatizing. It was really traumatizing, but not traumatizing in the way that I came away from it being like, oh no, I'm so afraid of relating. No, I'm just so crystal clear on what I am and am not. available for. So by the time God came through and said 90 days, I said, oh yeah, of course, please. Pulling my power back, clarify my vision, get me so clear on what my standards and boundaries are going forward, help me to communicate with my current relationships so that the people in my life know what this new standard of relating is. And the 90 days of peace just ended. And it ended with such an unintentional, beautiful crescendo without even realizing it. I scheduled back to back to back to back to back connection with some of my best friends, including a new friend. It became so clear in the last few days, like it just ended today. It is February 3rd when I'm recording this. It will not be February 3rd when I release this, but it did just end today. And last night I cried in grief because people have fallen out. People that I loved dearly, that I thought I would grow old with. I have lost best friends in the last year. That was fucking hard and very confronting. And it challenged my attachment. It challenged me. But don't go. I love you. It really showed me where I try to bend to control and so eye-opening. However, last night I cried. Today I woke up, I went for a walk with a new friend, and she asked me how I was doing. And I said, I don't know if I need to cry or laugh or both. Probably a bit of both, because I feel that I have locked in to this new reality of how I relate to myself, how I relate to life, God, source, how I relate to other people, what I am or am not available for, and how I relate to my business, how I relate to work, how I relate to the internet. Everything about relationship has shifted for me. And so today I'm tired. Hey Lord, you know I'm tired. God, that song. I'm Tired by Labyrinth and Zendaya. I'm just gonna drop that there. If you're new to my world, I am obsessed with music. If you are in my work and you follow my the playlists that I make for embodiment work are it is an art form for me. If you follow my Spotify, not only will you be pulled into a black hole of many different types of music. Oh my God. I'm just going to sidebar for a second and then we'll circle back. My name's Cecilia. So Saint Cecilia is the patron saint of sound and music. So she is known for being able to experience and feel and sense God. The way she receives God is as music. And it's like God sings through her and she translates that. I feel so resonant with my name, my given name, Cecilia Angel, because I have such a resonance with music. I feel my next creative expression, because I want a living, breathing, multi-dimensional palette of creative expression for my life. That includes dance, music, song, physical art, painting, and clay. I want to spin clay. Oh, yes. Just imagine the sensation. I'm such a sensational person. I just want to put my hands on the clay. I haven't done that before. I want to. I want to play the harp. I want to learn how to produce music and make beats, but like sing my light language raps over it. That's where I'm going. Okay. You heard it here first, folks. I'm going to be a musical girly as per my name, as per what was ordained through God when God named me Cecilia. Bless the patron saint of sound and music. So I am obsessed with music. You follow my Spotify. I'll link it in the show notes. It's a black hole, but you can search embodiment and you'll find so many embodiment playlists. So I'm Tired, Zendaya, and Labyrinth. When I hear this song, I get on my knees. This has taken me through some healing processes. Okay. It speaks to my soul. So good. Anyways, I digress. So I'm tired because I'm unplugging from this 90 days of peace. And it's not like I'm unplugging from peace. I feel more peaceful than I ever have in my entire life. I feel so clear. I feel so aligned. Peace. And even this podcast has been bringing me peace to know that I'm just getting this story out of me. So today we're going to talk about the next phase of the story, which I'm going to do my best to just condense. I honestly feel like what I need to do in this story is tell you from 2019 to the end of 2020. This might be a long podcast. As I've said before, I don't have any time cap. I don't want that. I want to be able to talk as long as I want to. Sometimes you'll get a 30-minute podcast. Sometimes you'll get an hour and a half. I don't know. I'm going to try to keep it reasonable. If I ever put out a 2-hour long podcast, that will probably be, that will be where I draw my limit. I don't want that long because I want you to actually listen. I want you to be present with me. And so I'm mindful of that, while also reminding you that part of my purpose is to stretch your presence, is to invite you into presence. This is an invitation to be more present, to sustain your awareness for a longer period of time. Okay. So in today's podcast, we're going to talk about the period of my life from 2019 to 2020. This was a huge period of my life because I finally said yes. I finally said yes all the way. And look, I didn't know what that would actually entail. I didn't know what it would require of me when I decided to say, you know what, burn the boats. I'm saying yes. I didn't know. That was a motherfucking free fall. I didn't know what would happen to me in response to that. But I did it. I was brave. I was brave and I said, okay, this is really hard, but I don't know what else to do. Okay, so where did we leave off? We left off, I had just completed ayahuasca, my 4th time sitting with ayahuasca, and I had a huge motherfucking vision that changed. It rocked me. It rocked my entire life. I came out of that ayahuasca ceremony a changed woman. And I remind you, my spiritual gifts came online all at once. So I walked out of ayahuasca all of a sudden aware of telepathy, of energy. I was picking up on energy in the field. I was seeing energy in other people. So I was incredibly curious about ayahuasca. I came out of that and I said, what? This exists? I need to know everything. Now, they were running these ceremonies every single month. Every single month. Ayahuasca did not let me back for 9 months. She said, girl, you need to integrate. But I said on a human level, I said, no, I don't want to integrate. I just want to keep coming back for more. And hindsight is always 2020. I look back and I say, yeah, girl, you needed to integrate. I applied for every single ceremony. Either they would have to move the ceremony and it wouldn't align with my schedule at work, or I wouldn't be able to get the days off. It just would not align. And 6 months later, because I knew there was deep healing work that needed to happen, I knew there was work that I wanted to be doing. 6 months later, I finally put up my hands and said, whatever, fuck it. And I booked a cabin for the weekend on this little island. So I'm from Vancouver Island in British Columbia, which if you look at the map on the west coast of Canada, there's a big island that runs down the side of British Columbia in Canada. It's beautiful, beautiful, but don't go there. It's overrun with tourists. No, don't even go there. You won't even like it. You won't even like it. But then around Vancouver Island, there's all these tiny little islands, which again, don't visit them. Leave them alone. There's all these cute, picturesque, beautiful islands that you would hate. And I booked a cabin there for the weekend. And I decided I would do a 3-day ceremony with psilocybin mushrooms. So I was going to do mushrooms alone in this cabin for 3 days, go into ceremony just in the same way that I did in ayahuasca, but I would do it just solo. So I go to this cabin. It is so cute. Oh my God. Now, I also want to say I've been traveling a lot. And because one of two things. First of all, me and my partner, we went on a 3-month trip in 2018 to Southeast Asia. On paper, the coolest ever. But our relationship was such a mess at the time that it was actually just really difficult and traumatic. It was beautiful in many ways, but also really difficult. Our whole relationship, we had wanted to travel together. We finally get to travel together and we were falling apart at the seams. It was the hardest 3 months. It was so hard and yet so beautiful and then so hard and all the things. It was full spectrum. Full spectrum. And so also because him and I were on the rocks, I was wanting to be traveling all the time. In 2019, I don't think that there was even a single month that I didn't travel in some way. There was always something that I was doing. As often as I could get away from the reality of my crumbling life at home, I was out of there. So booking a cabin on this island was such a relief because every time I left, I felt like I could be myself in a way that I just wasn't able to back at home. Now, there's also something else here. Ayahuasca opened up my ability to communicate and sense energy. And so I started to purchase plants. Now, when I became plant mama girly, This was an escape. This was a form of escapism because I lived in my home with my partner. I did not want to be around him. And so what I did is I took up plants. I bought 70 plants in the span of a month, maybe a little more than a month, but not much more. And I became obsessed with plants because then I could devote all of my energy to these plants. But what I was also experiencing was that I could psychically sense into the plants and what they needed. So I was starting to really engage with my psychic senses through the plants. There's a story that I have around this time where I had went away for the weekend. I think I went to Hawaii with a friend. And when I came back, one of my favorite plants had died. And I was in this weird place of my intuitive gifts were coming online. It was happening, but it was happening in the background so subtly that it was almost like I had never not had my spiritual gifts online. And so when I came home and this plant was dead, I sat down in front of this plant. I put my hands in the dirt, closed my eyes, go into meditation for 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, I come out of this meditation and I snap my head towards my partner. I said, "You left the window open? This is a tropical plant. You can't leave the window open. No wonder it died. I told you not to open the window. It's cold outside. It's the middle of winter." He looks at me bewildered, as if to be like, "How did you know? You've just been sitting there like a weirdo with your hands in the dirt for the last 30 minutes. You come out, you know that I opened the window while you were gone?" Oh, I'm sorry. I send apologies for the weird shit that was happening for me at this time. I know for him it was very uncomfortable and very hard for his mind to wrap around. I get it. It was hard for me too. I was trying to navigate my psychic awakening and all my spiritual gifts coming online, and all of a sudden being able to see visions and prophecy coming through me, sensing energy, being able to read people's energy, hearing people's thoughts. It was a really intense experience for me, okay? And I'm sure it was just as intense for him to be alongside me in that journey. Okay. So I bought a lot of plants. I also started painting because if I can't, I don't want to hang out with you. So I'll devote my time to taking care of these plants and making sure my plants are well cared for. My plants were thriving. That home was just taken over by plants. There was not a single space. I couldn't have fit any more plants. Every time that I came home with another plant, my partner would be like, "Where are you even going to put that?" "I don't know. I just knew it had to come home with me." Okay. And then I'm painting, just painting and painting and painting because I didn't have a different space. Instead, I would just do things that would tunnel vision so that I wouldn't have to be with him while we were in the same room. That was hard. I look back on that time in my life and I was so fucking miserable. I was so sad. Meanwhile, I'm traveling and going out into the world, trying not to be at home as often as possible just so I can be myself. Because when I was at home, I felt like I had to dim my light. I felt like I had to shrink who I was and what I was actually experiencing. We got to a point where we would go for walks and just be in silence, and I would say something and he would just not respond. There would just be crickets. And so it got really awkward. It got really awkward because we had nothing to talk about. And yet him and I were so attached to this idea of what our relationship was going to be that we didn't want to let it go. We stretched that out way longer than we should have. We did, because it was all we knew. We had been together for 7 years. 7 years. Since I was 19 years old, I didn't know anything else other than him. I didn't even know what life would look like without him. It was a really scary thing. So I book this cabin and I go to do mushrooms for the weekend. I remember getting into an argument with him prior to doing this. "Oh, you're going to go do mushrooms for a whole weekend." "Yes, I am, but alone. I'm going to be fine. Don't worry. Don't worry, I got this." And it was really profound. It was a really special, that weekend solidified for me that I could no longer pretend to just be the holistic nutritionist yogi that I had been presenting myself as. If you go back in my Instagram, you will see an entire period of time where you barely ever see my face. It's just pictures of food. And I realized, I said, well, this is only a fraction of who I am now. I am having this spiritual awakening. I cannot, in my integrity, proceed without starting to put myself out there. That same weekend, while in that cabin, I recorded one of my very first forward-facing videos. And I said, I have to be honest about the experience. This has evolved into something so much more than just food and yoga. There's a thing happening here. Just the other day, I went back back and I watched that video and I remember that moment because that weekend was so revolutionary. I realized that I really needed to get right with where I was being called and I needed to go all in. Now, that weekend, the first two ceremonies were profound and incredibly healing. The third ceremony, I started to touch on one of my deepest wounds. And I didn't even, at the time, I didn't know how to name it. I didn't know how to even be with it. I started to scratch the surface on something that felt like, ooh, oh shit. And I got myself stuck. I didn't know how to move through that. So I got myself into a really weird space of feeling hopeless, of feeling helpless. And I remember because this cabin had a loft and I had decided to do that final ceremony up on the loft. And I got myself stuck and I was so angry. Oh, fuck. Now I don't know what to do. In this moment, because I was so frustrated that I couldn't get into ayahuasca, if I were in an ayahuasca ceremony, this is the moment that I would go and ask for help, but I'm not. Instead, I'm all alone in a cabin with no support, and I want support. I come down the ladder from this loft, pissed. Ugh, now what? Now I'm just stuck. I don't know how to get myself out of this. I'm in a weird energy. I feel helpless and hopeless. I'm all alone. I don't want to be alone. I'm so tired of doing this alone. I want to do this in community. I want people around me. I want other people in my life that are having this caliber of experience. I don't want to feel like a black sheep. I don't want to feel like a lone wolf anymore. It's not helpful, especially because I got a taste of what it felt like to be in a community through Death Valley and through the ayahuasca ceremonies. I was in a community in ceremony, and that was different. And so that night, I cried out and I said, hey, I don't want to do this alone anymore. I'm tired. Hey, Lord, you know I'm tired. Woo! And I said, going forward, I want to find a community. I want people around me. I want people to do this work alongside. I can't do this alone. I had hit the threshold of solo work that if I actually continue to do the work on my own, it would actually be detrimental to my progress rather than beneficial. I really saw that night, that if I continue to try to just do this alone, I'm actually going to get myself into trouble because I had started to scratch the surface of that deeper wound. I didn't want to look at that by myself. And I had my therapist, of course, even that night. I look back on myself. Oh, silly girl. I called my therapist. She didn't answer, of course. It was a Saturday night. My therapist isn't going to answer the phone at that. But I wanted to talk to somebody. I needed help. And she was the only person I could think of that could help me. And I ended up spending the rest of the night calling my friends and just saying, hey, I'm on mushrooms. I'm very on mushrooms. I just need some support. I don't know exactly what the support is. I just don't want to be alone right now. And so I ended up having a series of conversations, which actually led to me talking to my mom, which was who I wanted to, we'll go into a whole thing about my mom. I had wanted to call my mom, but I knew she couldn't actually do the thing that I wanted her to. Like, I wanted her to be my mom, but she wasn't really my mom. But I did end up calling her, and it was actually really beautiful. At this point in my story, I can't give you all of the details. Things are accelerating so fast that it will take forever if I tell you every single story. I'm sure that some of these stories will just organically come up in the greater broadcast. They'll just naturally come up as we continue to share, but I want to keep it pretty concise because otherwise I'll be sitting here talking to you for an eternity and we got so much to cover, okay? So I make a decision. I don't want to do this alone anymore. I'm tired of being a lone wolf. I have hit a wall, a threshold where that's going to be detrimental. I call out to God and I say, I don't know, put me in a community. I don't know what that means because I had been a lone wolf my whole life. You need to understand, at this point in my life, I had relationships. Like, I had my closest friends, but I didn't know how to do deep intimacy. That was a completely foreign concept to me. If you were my friend, you had to be okay with the fact that we would hang out once and you wouldn't hear from me, you wouldn't see me again for like 3 months. So intimacy was new. I didn't know how to relate to other people. So it was a pretty vulnerable thing for me to cry out and say, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to be held in community. 2 weeks later, I wake up in the morning and I had a little routine where I would listen to an audiobook or a podcast. I would drink my tea. And on this morning, I decide to listen to one of my favorite podcasts, Aubrey Marcus's podcast. And I put on his podcast and drinking my tea. And he opens up the podcast. I literally never listened to the rest of this podcast. The only thing I needed to hear was what he was about to say. I'm drinking my tea and he starts talking about Fit for Service. And he says, applications are open for the next quarter of Fit for Service. I didn't comprehend what it was. I wasn't even listening anymore because as soon as he started talking about it, all of a sudden I'm standing at the counter being electrified You need to apply. There was no question. I knew in my entire body before he could even finish. I paused that podcast. I didn't even ask any questions. I filled out the application and I sent it. I didn't know what Fit for Service was until after I'd already applied. Then I went and I looked at the promotional video, and then I found out what the actual thing was. And even then, I wouldn't know until I was a part of it. But I remind you that in my ayahuasca ceremony, ayahuasca had said, you're going to work with Aubrey Marcus. And at the time, that made no sense to me. This is just some guy on a podcast that I listen to all the time. I didn't have any I had never heard of Fit for Service until this morning. I didn't know. But in this moment, as I listened to him talk about Fit for Service, and my whole body was vibrating. And that was a pretty new experience for me, to get this wash of sensation that was my whole body saying, you need to do this. So I applied. I didn't even tell my partner that I applied because, again, he was very in conflict. I was keeping a lot of things secret from him because I didn't feel safe to talk about any of the things that were happening anymore. So I applied and I said, I'll tell him if I get in, because it wasn't a guarantee that I would make it through the application process. There's a process that you have to go through in order to apply before they say, okay, yeah, you're a good fit for this. A few days later, I get an email from one of my mentors, Eric, and he says, we loved your application. You were one of our favorite applications. You're in. Welcome. Later on, I would discover that there was other things that other people had to do. They just saw my application. They said, yes, absolutely. Yep. Her. Which I was so grateful for. So now I am approved. I didn't even have the financial resources for this. Actually, this is a great place to sidebar something that was happening at this time, okay? I was probably 18 and I was in the back seat of the car with one of my best friends at the time. I was in the car with her dad, and he gave me advice that, look, this is not conventional advice, and I wouldn't even recommend this, okay? This is unique advice. All right. He said, get credit cards, live your life, max them out. Go and do things that are fun. Don't worry about it. In your 30s, you can pay off your debt. In your 30s, you can figure that out. But spend your 20s doing fun shit that lights you up, and don't worry about it. You'll figure it out later. Terrible advice, except it was the best advice, because the first part of my 20s, I was really responsible and really on top of it. But then when I started having my spiritual awakening, I had all this credit, like I ended up getting myself in $70,000 of debt. And we'll talk about that later, because I also miraculously, my debt is gone. Thank you, God, for that gift. Now, that doesn't happen to everyone, so I'm not saying like go max out your credit cards, okay? And if you do not blame me. I am not responsible for your debt and your decisions. You are sovereign, okay? That's why I was traveling so much, is because I had all this credit. And I was like, why have I just been keeping this credit? I can go on trips and I can go do spiritual things and I can go do all this stuff and enjoy my life, just like my friend's dad had said, right? So I didn't have the money for Fit for Service, but I said, whatever, I'll just put it on my credit card. I trust that I'm supposed to be there and I'm going to figure it out later. So next thing I know, I'm a part of Fit for Service. I am thrust into this wild world. Now, if you don't know what Fit for Service is or was, if you don't know what the first couple of years of Fit for Service were, everybody in it was having an experience, because we had never been in a community of people that were desiring to make such a big impact in the world. I was all of a sudden surrounded by high caliber humans that were having wild spiritual awakenings, that were being guided through their dharma to express their mission, that were doing really cool things in the world. I didn't even realize that these types of people existed. This was all new to me. I was overwhelmed. I mean, all of a sudden I'm getting on Zoom calls multiple times a week. I'm in different groups. I'm making friends, and I went all in. Whoa. What Fit for Service did for me was it really highlighted that I was not at all in alignment with the life I was meant for. It was like I would get on these calls and I would be coached by Aubrey to having conversations with these people that were doing these wild things with their lives. And then I would go back to my life and it just didn't match, but I knew I was a match for that. Maybe I wasn't there yet. I wasn't fully embodied, but I knew that was where I was going. I was realizing that I was made for more and that there was more available for me, but it would require that I sacrifice what I had built up to that point. That summer was incredibly expansive for me because my mind was being blown open. I went to a festival with a bunch of friends and tried acid for the first time and had these really wild wild, beautiful experiences of connection, staying up all night, laughing, dancing. I went to Burning Man, and at Burning Man, I got to connect in person with an entire group of people from Fit for Service for the first time. And I was getting a taste of, oh, there's a whole world here. And I was simultaneously feeling the death of what was, which was this wild contrast that I was experiencing. I was literally at Burning Man, knowing that I would have to go home and change everything. I couldn't carry on. There was even a moment I was in the temple at Burning Man, and there was this man that I met through Fit for Service. We met up at the temple. He pulled me aside and he said, hey, I need to reflect something to you. You are dragging this man along, and I can tell that you don't want to be in relationship with him, and you are doing him a great disservice by continuing to remain in this relationship. You have to leave him because you are not in integrity. You don't want to be there. And it's not fair to him for you to remain in this relationship. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. It was very hard to receive, but I agreed. I said, yeah, you're right. Because I could feel the way. It was almost like I was acting in unintentional, shady ways because I was trying to I was trying to have one foot in one life and one foot in the other. And it was pulling me out of integrity. The way that I was being was not congruent, and I could feel it in myself. And so I came back from Burning Man, and I knew, but I didn't make that decision quite yet. I knew after Burning Man, I can't be here anymore. And then I attended the first Fit for Service Summit. Now, before I even get to this part of the story, I just want to say that I'm about to tell you something that to this day, I feel very vulnerable sharing. I've shared this in my newsletter, but this is something I'm not proud of. I said this in the last episode, that I'm going to admit something to you that I am to this day not proud of. And it taught me something. Oh, it was so confronting. It was so confronting. I went to the first Fit for Service Summit. It was already so expansive to be online with this community. It was already so expansive to get that little bit of experience at Burning Man with them, starting to get a taste. But to spend an entire week, we were in Sedona because the actual summit was just the weekend, I think Thursday to Sunday, but everyone was staying a few days early and stayed a few days after. So now I'm in a house with people from Fit for Service. We're going to these events. We're having these expansive experiences. We're also doing ceremony alongside the weekend. The whole time I was shook. Like, this exists? This is an option? We could be operating like this, and everyone's conscious and connected and seeing things from a spiritual perspective. That was a game changer for me. It also showed me how much of a baby I was. Back home, the experiences that I had were like, whoa, so exceptional. I come into this space and I'm nothing. I was nothing. I had barely scratched the surface of spiritual awakening. I was realizing I really didn't know anything. I came into that space and I realized that I had work to do to be the version of myself I knew I could be. Being side by side with such high caliber humans showed me that I had years of development ahead of me. Now, I had been so suppressed, especially around my spiritual awakening. I didn't have anyone to talk to about these experiences, except for my one best friend. And even then, I would tell her about these experiences and she would say, cool, I don't really understand, but that's awesome. She would give me the space to talk about it, but nobody had fully received the experience I'd been having. And so sometime at the beginning of the weekend, we all took a hike and we did a little microdose of mushrooms, and I ended up walking with this man. We're just talking, and next thing I know, he's asking me about myself, and I start to tell him my story of Vipassana. As I'm telling him this story, he is so engaged with me and so present, saying, What? That's what happened to you? Oh my God, I am fascinated. He is so fascinated and so engaged with my story in a way that I had been aching for. I was thirsty for it. Oh, you actually care about this experience that I'm having? Oh, well, I've been having a whole experience. Throughout the weekend, we kept bumping into each other very synchronistically. I'd turn around a corner and then he'd be there. I'd be walking up the stairs and he'd be there. We just started to bump into each other. And so we started to hang out, we started to talk, and he was asking me more. He wanted to know, tell me everything about this experience that you've been having. So that started to really draw something out of me. By the end of the weekend, I was so enamored by not even just this man, but the presence that was being given to me in a way that I had been trying to get from my partner. I found myself getting ready to walk away from that weekend feeling regret that I couldn't actually lean into this connection that I was having. That if I didn't lean into it, I might not ever see this man again. I didn't know if I would ever see him again. We lived in totally different two different countries. And so I did something that I am not proud of. I cheated on my partner. I went to this man and I said, look, I'm afraid I'm not going to see you again. And I engaged with him. And now, if you heard the first iteration of my story, my awakening began because I had cheated on someone and I had promised myself I would never do that again. I promised myself I wouldn't. But that shadow came up. And honestly, a lot of my shadows started to come up as I started to actually say yes to the life that I desired. And I want to be so clear that for real, this would be the last time. And it taught me something. And not to make excuses, because it's never okay. It's never okay to hurt someone like that. It's never okay to betray somebody's trust. It's never okay to be so shady and secretive and to hide shit like that. That gives me the ick. I look back on that and I cringe at myself, okay? Major regret. I can have compassion for that girl who made that choice because she was feeling so suppressed. She was feeling so unseen. She was so fucking afraid of the choice that was before her. I was so afraid because it wasn't even that I hadn't tried to leave. I actually tried to leave that relationship several times. And every time he would find a way back in. Some sort of manipulation. I do so much for you. What about when you said this? Sweet talking. Oh, I promise I'm going to change. I promise I'm going to change. And so it wasn't like I hadn't made attempts. I just hadn't had the courage to actually lock it in. And I know that not even unconsciously, but semi-consciously, I knew that in my mind, if I cheated on him, then there would be a good enough reason for him to let it go. I was actually pretty aware of that story going on in my mind, that I needed a good enough reason. Because on paper, our relationship wasn't bad. In fact, on paper, our relationship actually checked a lot of boxes, but it checked the boxes for this cookie cutter life, a traditional life of we're going to buy a home and we're going to have a family and everything's going to be stable. I'm going to have a job and I'm going to work 9 to 5. It all looked good. It all looked safe, but it didn't light up my soul. I couldn't be myself in that relationship. He didn't care about this whole other part of myself that wasn't expressed. And so I can have compassion for the choice that I made, the semi-conscious choice that I made, because then I went home from that experience and I admitted immediately, within 3 days, I was out of that relationship. I came home from Sedona. I let my partner know, look, not only am I done in this relationship, but I have cheated on you. You will never be able to trust me again. You have to let me go. But I also quit my job. And I said, whatever, I'm going all in. I'm going all in on my life. I'm burning it all down. I remember getting on a call with Aubrey and I was sharing after the summit. And I said, I quit my job. I left my partner. I am now free falling. I don't know. And he looked at me and said, okay, you burned the boats. There's no turning back now. You better go all in on the decision that you just made. I also had another person from Fit for Service say, you know, you should not make any rash decisions within a week of ceremony, right? I mean, lesson learned. Look, I wanted to say, sometimes we have to burn our life to the ground in order to start over. I have worked with the imagery of the phoenix time and time again. And this was a true embodied phoenix moment of, fuck it. This isn't clean. This is totally messy. In fact, this is totally chaotic. This was not a grounded period of time in my life. I was terrified as I made all these choices. I was so afraid. And I just said, whatever, I need to burn it down. I can't do this anymore. The pressure had built so intensely at that point that all I could do was burn it to the ground and start again. Because the life that I had built was not built from a place of sovereignty, from a place of truth. It was built on somebody else's dream that wasn't mine. It was built from a disconnection from my soul. It was built from fear and anxiety and overwhelm and sadness and hurt. And I was being shown a new path. I was being shown that there was more. And so, no, it wasn't grounded. It was motherfucking messy and it was painful. It did not feel good to go home and say to the man that I loved, that I had loved for 7 years, that I had betrayed him and that I was leaving beyond what made sense to him. And I said to him, you don't even like me anymore. Why do you want this? It is wild because even though I betrayed him, he still wanted to be in relationship. He still begged me to stay. It was so hard. We were living together for another month after that, navigating, packing up our things and moving out of our home and trying to figure out who gets what. We were practically married. Meanwhile, I was also starting to cultivate this relationship with this other man. oh, such a mess. And I will just say, all of my friends were concerned for me. On one level, I think they knew that I needed to do what I was doing, but I wasn't grounded. I was free falling. So a little under a month after I burned the boats, I quit my job, I quit my relationship. I was now living in our basically empty apartment. And this man from Fit for Service comes to visit me. We go into ayahuasca together. At this point, I became so present. I was forced into presence because I couldn't see even just a few days ahead of myself. There was so much unknown. I was fully in the void. I didn't know. I just burned down the rest of my life. I don't know what my life is now. I don't even know who I am now. And so I sat with ayahuasca with a prayer of help me to see. And I remember that first ceremony that weekend. She comes to me, and what opens up in my vision is this huge, expansive room with these blue and white geometrics. And ayahuasca is bouncing from wall to wall in this huge space. And she's saying, wow, there's so much room in here. And it's echoing. There's so much space that you've created. What are you going to do? You get to start again. Blank slate. What are you going to create? And she said to me, tonight there will be no suffering. Tonight we just celebrate because you now have the opportunity to start again. You're starting again. I'm celebrating you. And we celebrated that whole weekend. Oh, it was so good. I was shown all the potentials of my life. Now that there was so much space, there was this giddy, excited feeling coming from ayahuasca, coming from God, coming from my higher self saying, just you wait, just you wait. There are so many good things that are coming to you now. And I got so excited. Okay, there's so much potential. There's so much potential. So shortly after that, I went to Miami and I ended up spending, I think it ended up being like a month and a half in Miami with my new partner. We also went to another Fit for Service summit together. We were really immersing ourselves in this new reality. And this man was so fascinated about my awakening. And he was giving me so much permission. It was truly whiplash from one person who would rather that I suppress that and never talk about it. I don't want to hear about it. Don't even speak about it at all. To now, all of a sudden, I am in relationship with someone who wants to know. Tell me more. Give me the details. We're going into ceremony together, and we are, with every ceremony, my channel is opening more and more and more. And the more permission that I was given, the more my gifts started to come online at a rapid pace. And I remember at one point telling him, look, we need to slow down because I don't have any idea how to navigate this psychic space that was opening. I was starting to see visions. I was starting to receive communication from guides and spirits. Beings were communicating. There was a period of time, this period of time in my life was wild. There was a period of time where every single day I was having a new being or guide come into my psychic space and I was being asked to work with somebody new. So every single day, and of course my partner at the time, this man that I was dating, he was reminding me, he was holding me accountable. You need to sit down and meditate, connect with these guides. What are they teaching you today? Who is it? What do they look like? What are they saying? And I'm relaying to him. So he's having me practice my connection with my channel. He's also reading all of these books on channeling. How do you connect to the Akashic records? How do you channel? Who do you channel? What can you channel? What does this even mean? What is even happening? And he's relaying all this information and finding a way to teach me how to navigate my spiritual gifts. Meanwhile, I was very resistant to the fact that I was awakening my gifts because it was all very fascinating to him, but it was a very intense somatic experience for me. It would burn out my nervous system. We were channeling constantly. We were also doing Joe Dispenza meditations for like an hour, sometimes an hour and a half every single day. We were going so hard. Sitting with medicine. I remember we were in Malibu during the Fit for Service Summit, and afterwards there was a series of ceremonies that were held with bufo, which is 5-MeO-DMT. It's a secretion that comes off the back of a toad, and you smoke it, and it brings you into the experience of oneness with God. And it was the first time that I experienced bufo, and in this experience, I came to the remembrance of God, and God gave me very clear instructions and said, this is an experience that I want you to cultivate. I want you to be able to bring people into this experience without the medicine. So now that you have a taste of bufo, of this DMT experience, remember, this is something that you can guide people into experiencing. Now, I have had many experiences of people just sitting around me and saying they can smell DMT. or people in my space and in my containers coming into a God experience of remembrance, of oneness with God. So this has become, I'm pretty well known for that experience. And so it was given to me as a message during that ceremony that I would learn through the medicine how to sustain that frequency in order to be able to bring people into that state. And it was given as clear instruction in my first experience with Bufo. I had no familiarity with this medicine at all. The woman who was facilitating me got very triggered because I had a really powerful experience. Sorry? I don't know. This is the thing. I have really unique experiences. I don't want to play it small. I don't want to shrink the experience I'm having. I don't want to pretend like I'm not having the experience or like soften it for people. But I have found that time and time again, when I'm honest about the experience I'm just having every single day, people tend to get triggered. Either they're curious and they lean in and they want to know more, or they want to learn how, or it triggers something in them of disbelief or judgment. There's sometimes no, that can't be possible. That must just be your ego. No. Promise you, I'm just having this experience and it has not been easy. It has been really fucking hard. And so no, there's no fucking there's no ego in this. This has been a lot. It's a lot. Anyone who is going through an awakening, anyone who is awakening their gifts, you talk to them and they're like, no, this is not something simple and straightforward, especially when there's no guidance. I was really lucky to have my boyfriend who was helping me in the best way that he could, but he didn't have a comprehension experientially of what was happening for me. And oftentimes he would get triggered and be jealous of the things that were coming through my channel and the things that I was speaking and the things that I was seeing and the gifts that were coming online. He'd say, oh, I want this. I want this. I'm like, you don't understand. It requires a great amount of responsibility. Just like that vision that I saw in ayahuasca, I pushed it away because I saw the responsibility to be able to see and feel and sense on this level. I find that the people that are able to awaken their spiritual gifts, they're people that have been doing this for lifetimes and really understand the gravity and the responsibility in being able to see and feel and sense. It's not just something that's novel and exciting. It's something that is given when you can approach it with head down, heart forward, and a level of maturity. So if you don't yet have your spiritual gifts online, when they do come online, just know it's somatically intense. This is why I do what I do, so that you can go through spiritual awakening supported and not get overwhelmed in your nervous system. Because as you will see, the more I tell this story, you will see just how overwhelmed I got, because as much as I was grateful for the support of my partner, he actually ended up overwhelming my system because he and I did not understand how to regulate the nervous system and to sustain the level of awakening that was occurring in the acceleration of that awakening. So I think it's useful in this moment to just take a deep breath together. Because this season of my process, although it was incredible and profound and beautiful, and I have no regrets, this season that I'm sharing with you now, the version of Cecilia that was in that was so ungrounded and so overwhelmed and trying her best to keep up with the acceleration that was happening. So at this time, because I connected to a collective of guides, these beings from the Pleiades star system, and I no longer channel guides in this way. And so sometimes I think back at this version of myself, I'm like, oh God. I mean, these guides came through to help me with my channel. That was their only purpose. But because me and this boyfriend had seen Paul Selig channel, he suggested that we start doing events where I would channel, and he guided a particular type of breath work. So he would guide the breath work, and then I would bring through channeled messages from my guides. And my guides had very specifically said, that's not our purpose with you. We're here to help you to sustain and open your channel so that you can hold more awareness of God. They very clearly communicated that to me. Our only purpose is this. However, if you would like, we will speak through you. It was a very wild experience. I would close my eyes, I would surrender. And if you look up channels that are channeling other beings, you move out of the way and other beings speak through your bodies. So that was the experience experience that I was having. I was hosting these events pretty frequently, allowing my guides to come through, and the messages that were coming through were profound, but my nervous system was still having a very hard time keeping up with that. The man that I was dating was really seeing that we had landed on what we might say a gold mine because the wisdom that was coming through. I feel that I was in many ways extorted at this time. I was advocating for myself as best as I knew how. This was all really new. And saying, look, I don't really know what it is that I'm doing. I feel like I need to practice this more before I put myself out there. I remember when this all first started coming on, I said to him, no one will ever know that this is what's happening. Nobody needs to know that I'm having this experience. He said, what do you mean? You could help so many people. And the truth was, he was hooking me up with these sessions. I started doing readings for people, which I had no idea. He starts setting me up with these readings with people that he knew. And the readings were profound. The things that were coming through in these sessions, people were crying and people were thanking me. And wow, what a gift. It's amazing the things that you can do. I even started doing mediumship and started channeling people who had passed and bringing people a lot of relief unexpectedly. I didn't intend to be a medium. I was just starting to realize that I could really do all of it. And next thing I knew, people were booking sessions. I was booked out in sessions. I was doing these weekly events. People were showing up to these events where I would channel my guides. And it was all really wild to me. And this boyfriend of mine was very business savvy. And so he was teaching me how to start a business. This is your thing. Just put yourself out there. Start before you're ready. Now, look, and I was going to say this earlier, actually, we're circling back to a point that I wanted to make. One, I don't recommend to anyone that you burn the boats. I needed to do that for me. That was what I needed to do, but I don't recommend that. That was not the easy path. That was actually really uncomfortable. What I recommend from a more grounded place is slowly titrate into the new version of you. Slowly titrate into the life that you desire. For some people, burning it all down is necessary, but it's actually really rare. That's not my highest recommendation. Two, when it comes to awakening your channel and your spiritual gifts, in hindsight, I go back and there was actually an intuition in me from the beginning. I felt so uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to advocate for myself. I didn't yet have the courage and the power to be able to say, wait, hold on, this is too much. I know that now. I see that now. There are lots of things that you should just start before you're ready. And I don't have any regrets that I started before I was ready. However, when it comes to holding people's nervous systems, taking care of other people, showing up for other people, holding space for other people, take your time. Don't rush in. You have such a responsibility to take care. And I'm really lucky. That I didn't cause too much harm when I was just flying off the seat of my pants. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing my best. I'm giving people advice based on what's coming through my channel. I got really lucky that shit did not go sideways. I see time and time again people that open up their channel and then immediately think, oh, I can monetize this. Oh, I should start a business. Oh, I should help other people. Look, pause. When you first open up your spiritual gifts, they are for you. They are for you, to help you to get your body in right accord. Don't open up your gifts and immediately say, oh, I'm going to be in service to someone. Yes, down the road, yes. But you are your first and most important workbook. You get to practice on yourself first. Hear me in that. Do not rush to how can I make money off of this? And I don't feel that I was rushing into how can I make money off of this. I did start a business way too soon. Before I really knew what it was that I was doing. I don't regret it because it gave me a lot of practice and it showed me that I can serve. I still was serving at a very high level, even when I had no idea. And I was still so afraid and I was figuring it out. And I'm glad because I have so much practice and so much wisdom. And now I can come to you and I can say that. Now I can say that. So if you are just starting off or your gifts are just coming online, I'm so grateful that I made mistakes early on so that I can come to you and say, hey, whoa, hold up, integrate, rather than jumping immediately to, oh, I'm going to quit my job and start a business as a professional channel. Okay. Now, in many ways, I was really blessed. I quit my job. I started my business. I mean, I had already kind of started my business, but I really went all in on my business. And as I did that, my gifts came on. I came out as a channel. I had people referring and booking sessions. I was booked out every week with sessions, and it was very exciting. I was starting to see, oh, this is what I get to do. This gets to be a part of this is my job. What? COVID hits. And I have now the perfect foundation for an online business. COVID was not a difficult year for me because it pushed me online because everybody was now working online. So it ended up being really beneficial for me. I started running programs, I started doing readings and energy healings and was really helping people, channeling my guides. People were coming to me, flocking to me like, wow, this cool thing that Cecilia's doing. Now, meanwhile, in the background, I was also doing deep work with the man that I was with. We ended up being stuck together during quarantine for the entire 2020. So it was just him and I. I was running my business and we were also doing deep work. He was having me channel every day. We were going into ceremony. We were really going very deep, like incredibly deep into this work. And I was trying to hold a business and trying to figure out how to run a business while also stretching my nervous system to its capacity, doing a lot of psychedelics. We also did a dieta with ayahuasca. In 2020, I sat with ayahuasca 14 times. 14 in 2020 while dieting. And so I was on this very purified diet, living in the middle of nowhere. Oh, it was honestly so fucking beautiful. I remember midway through 2020 and so many people were saying like, oh, this is so hard to be so isolated. And I was having a peak experience. 2020 was great for me. My business was booming, things were exciting. I was living a whole new reality. I had burned my entire life down, and all of a sudden I opened my eyes and I was in a brand new dimension of reality, being encouraged to put myself out there and to be seen and to channel and to open up and to give people permission, especially because there was such a huge spiritual awakening in 2020 that was happening as a result of COVID. So people were really flocking to me. And all of that was exciting, but I was getting more and more burnt out. And I didn't have the infrastructure to hold the amount of energy that was now coming towards me. I didn't know how to hold that. I didn't even know. I was trying to heal my own stuff in the background because now I was being put on this pedestal of Cecilia, the channel. And she's so magical and she has these guides and they bring through this wisdom and oh, it's so interesting. But behind the scenes, I was healing some deep shit. Some of my deepest wounds were starting to come up to the surface, especially doing that dieta with ayahuasca. In those ceremonies, I was starting to see the severity of my trauma. I was starting to see that I really had my work cut out for me. And I was afraid. I was really afraid of being called out for it. I was afraid of being seen in that. What if someone finds out? What if someone finds out that I'm not perfectly awakened? That, yeah, I have these stories and this is happening. My gifts are coming online. That's undeniable. I'm having an experience here. And I'm a human being that's processing deep pain from my childhood. I was trying to hold both of these things at once, and it pulled me out of integrity. It pulled me far out of integrity because I now had this reputation, this professional reputation to uphold of being a guide and a mentor for people. But behind the scenes, I was starting to look at this intense generational pain that I was holding. And these two things started coming into competition with one another. Well, on one hand, I am having a profound spiritual awakening, wild experiences and realizations and visions and these messages that were coming through, this awakening back to God. But on the other, I'm realizing that I'm holding a lot of pain in my body and not normal levels of pain. It didn't even make sense to the actual experience that I had had. I was holding ancestral pain and I was seeing it. It was being shown to me. And I was suffering behind the scenes, trying my best not to fumble it because I really liked what I was creating. But I also knew I was building on top of sand. Something in me knew that, okay, this is great, but I need to be able to sustain this. This is beautiful and amazing. And I'm so excited. Wow, I'm so glad that you're so inspired by what's happening for me. But I don't think I'm the person to hold this. I don't know if I got this. Also, not surprisingly, I started to have major conflict with this relationship. I mean, one, it didn't start out in very high integrity. It was set up for failure from the beginning, of course. It was necessary to get me from one reality to the next. It catalyzed me, it catapulted me, and it really did in a huge way. In many ways, I'm very grateful, but it also burnt me out. I mean, we were doing a lot. I don't even think I could even put it all. Like, it would require so much for me to explain the wild experiences that him and I were having every single day, every day, communicating with extraterrestrials, having experiences of getting pulled through wormholes, astral traveling. We were doing crazy meditations and activations and trainings and the dieta and all kinds of psychedelics outside of that. It was a lot. Of course, I was burnt out. I was so burnt out. I was trying to accelerate my healing so that I could be the version of myself that I was now professionally presenting myself to be. And so eventually, I dropped it. In October 2020, at the time, I had 8-9 people in my one-on-one program, and me and this partner traveled down to the States to do a peyote ceremony with people from Fit for Service, and it was, it was so good. That peyote ceremony was so special. There was something so special about that experience. And so we all got together in ceremony in Colorado. We were there with a friend, we were staying with a friend. And then we're heading to a Fit for Service summit in Sedona. And on the road from Colorado to Sedona, I get a phone call. It's my sister. And she tells me that my mother had died the night before, that they had just found her that morning. As I'm receiving this news on the phone, I go into this really interesting dissociative state, as if my sister has told me that her mom has died, but not mine. And I say to her, I'm so sorry. I am gearing myself to hold space for my sister telling me of her loss, not fully registering yet that it was mine as well. But then she starts to tell me the details of the morning of discovering what had happened, who had found her. And she tells me that the night before our mother passed, she was in the bath and she had done a cord cutting ceremony with our mother. Her and I had been talking for some time that the reason that our mom was holding on, because she was basically just the walking dead. She was not fully there, especially in that last year of her life. We had been saying that the reason that our mother was holding on was because she had not yet let her go. And the profundity of my sister telling me the right before, and it probably was within an hour before our mother passed, that she was in the bath cutting cords with our mom, that she then died. As she shared that with me, all of a sudden it landed because it was so profound. I remember feeling my body go, whoa, that's beautiful. And then it hit me. It was like I was looking at a semi truck and its headlights were in front of me and it was coming at me full speed and there was nothing I could do. The reality of what this phone call was hit me. And again, I remind you, I'm on the road on my way to a Fit for Service summit. There is 150 people that go to these summits. It's not a small event. Synchronistically, my friend who's driving is a grief and death counselor, and then my boyfriend in the back. I get off the phone. I say, my mom died. She pulls over on the side of the road. I start to cry. I literally slink into, you know, where your feet go in the car? I was now on the floor underneath the seat, sobbing with the realization that my mother had passed. And this was a big deal. In my Death Valley story, I shared a bit about my journey with my mom. What I was experiencing in that moment was grief and heartache, but also relief. There was also a part of me that came through and said, this is going to be a gold mine. I knew immediately that this was the biggest catalyst of my life to date. I had been waiting for my mother to die for most of my life. I had been watching her get sicker and sicker and sicker. I had been asking for her to pass because I was ready to move on. It also came at a time in my life where I needed to stop. Yes, everything that happened in 2020 was so beautiful. My awakening, my gifts coming online, coming out as a channel, becoming a professional channel. All of that was amazing, but I was moving too fast. I was moving way too fast. And I knew this was going to change me forever. Of course it was. Of course it was. The timing on this was ridiculous. As we were driving to Sedona, because we still had hours left of our trip to get to Sedona for the summit, I remember sitting in the front seat, connecting to my mother, and immediately she came to me as her pure soul. And thank God, because there's the version, and I'll tell this will be my next episode. I'll talk about my mom, and that's going to be hard. I already know that episode's going to be hard, okay? There's the version of my mom that I knew on a human 3D level. And then there's the version of my mom that I now know on the level of soul, because her and I have gone through an insane process since receiving this news. And thank God, because my mother came to me that night while driving to Sedona, and she came to me as her soul. And she was pure light, huge, this huge soul, high ascended master energy. She comes to me and she looks me in the eye and she says, hi, I'm okay. And she shows me how she passed. She shows me her passing. Now, this woman was in a deeply traumatized body, had experienced horrific things, truly a tragic life. She shows me her life that she had experienced. She leaves her body, shakes it off, and just carries on. And she says to me, that, for me, a drop in the bucket. And she says, you're welcome. I did that for you. Now, in this moment, I didn't understand at all what that meant. On some level, I did. On a soul level, I did. Okay, I know that this is a really big catalyst, but it would take years before I would really understand that everything my mother did from the moment of my conception, including the most painful things, was a gift that made it possible for me to become who I am today. My journey with my mother has been the most difficult and painful, and yet the most heartbreakingly beautiful, profound story. And the relationship that I have with her soul now, God, I love her, and I fucking see her in the truth of who she is, the truth of who she showed herself to be that night after she died. She made sure I knew. She made sure that I knew who she really was. Don't get caught up on the version of me that you knew who was in a body. I'm glad that she showed herself to me in that moment, because it really anchored something in a reference point of, oh, I see who you really are, and I see what you really did already, right out the gate. So that when things get hard, and things got hard, things got hard, I could remember who she really is. So I have fresh news of my mother's passing. And it's not like my mom was some positive person in my life. She was toxic and abusive and abandoned me. She was an addict and an alcoholic my entire life. She was chaotic and intense. When we lose somebody that we love, upon their passing, more often than not, what happens is that we start to remember all of the moments that we shared with them. And what started to become apparent was that every single memory that I had with my mother was laced in trauma. That there wasn't a single memory that I had that didn't have some sort of pain attached to it. So I arrive at this Fit for Service summit. I remember the first person that I saw upon arrival. He comes to me and he gives me a hug. Oh, it's so good to see you. How are you? And I look him in the eyes and I say, well, I just found out that my mom died. And I knew, I was like, wow, I guess I'm going to be that person this weekend, because I don't know. I don't want to fake it. And yet this is what's real. I just experienced, I'm not even fully landed down yet from receiving this information. I received it on the way here. I don't know. I don't even know who I am. The person who I love the most, who has hurt me the most in life, just died, and I don't know who I don't know. I had barely landed down from burning my life down, and then my mom died. This was a year after I burnt my whole life down and left my relationship. That week in Sedona was really hard. I had a really hard time keeping it together. I was not myself. I had an event. I was hosting an event at that summit, one of my channeling events. I got photos back from that event, and I look traumatized. I look like I'm going through it. It was so vulnerable, but I couldn't even fake it. I couldn't even pretend. Meanwhile, my relationship with this man was falling apart at the seams. Even before I got this news, one of my best friends at the time, who I was staying with, had been already reflecting, you got to get out of this. This is not good for you. Then I got the news of my mom's dying, and I clung to him because it was something safe and familiar. The last thing I wanted to do was also break up with my boyfriend after receiving the news of my mother's death. And yet, I'm at this Fit for Service summit, and I'm having all of my friends come to me and say, we're really concerned about this relationship. And I was so raw. I know. Can you give me a second? My mom just died. Please do not tell me I need to also break up with my boyfriend the same week that my mom died. I already know that. I know. Give me a second to be human. However, after the summit, it was my birthday. Thank you, Mama, for dying 9 days before my birthday. My birthday will always be tied birth and death every year. My mother's death anniversary, and then 9 days later, my birthday. That's just how it is. So on my birthday, after the summit is over, they host a Wachuma ceremony, which is a cactus, very heart opening. It's beautiful, gentle medicine, very grounded. And during the Wachuma ceremony, I receive what's supposed to be a meditative dose of Bufo, 5-MeO. It was not a meditative dose. I was given a full dose and had a full experience of oneness and union with God in the middle of the ceremony. It was very intense. So it's my birthday. I'm on Wachuma. I had just been blasted unexpected with Bufo. My mom had just died. I was having an experience. And after the ceremony's over, everyone is going to this one house for this after party, the post-ceremony after party. And I get in the car with my boyfriend, and I had been ignoring him the whole ceremony. He could feel it. We get into the car, we go to the party, and outside the party, I lost my shit. I'm in the car yelling at him, telling him that we are done, that it's over. I can't do it anymore. I just need to be alone. I don't want this anymore. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. And I break up with him. One of my friends keeps coming out to check on me, is definitely concerned about where I'm at. I get out of the car. I go into the house. I go into the back of the house to the balcony where nobody is. And I sit down, wrap myself in a blanket, and I post up there. I tapped out. My mom just died. It's my birthday. I did too many psychedelics today. I am totally falling apart at the seams. I just broke up with my boyfriend. I'm vulnerable. I'm surrounded by all these people that have this idea of who I am based on what they had experienced of me. And I can't be her right now. I just can't. Trying, but I was unraveling. Now I'm sitting there alone. I'm done. Deep fried. I don't even know why I stayed at the party. Just sitting there. And during that week, we had been holding sound healings at the house that we were staying in. People from Fit for Service would come in and they would receive these sound healings from us. It was a gift that we were offering back to the community. And the night before, one of my friends had brought this man. They were actually seeing each other lightly. They dated for a little bit. And him and I had become really good friends. We were sitting there. I was like, oh, this is Soul Fam. Oh, this is amazing. I'm so grateful. So I made a new friend just the night before at one of our sound healings, and he comes up the stairs and he sits down beside me and he said, hey, what's going on? And I say, well, I just broke up with my boyfriend. It's my birthday. My mom just died. And he just holds this beautiful space for me. And I felt so much gratitude for this man. Wow, thank you. This was really healing. This is the reason I came to the party, is just so that I could have this moment. Now, there's a whole story, so don't get ahead of yourself here. There's a whole story, a profound story, but I'll let you in on a little secret, which is that I would come to marry this man that sat with me. It was like God just left this little drop of hope. I didn't know it at the time. Neither of us knew it at the time. I mean, he was dating my friend. I just broke up with my boyfriend. I wasn't trying to be in any kind of relationship. But God planted this little seed of, I know this is so hard, but there is hope. And I look back at that moment, and it's just one of those funny things where you look back in time and say, oh, of course you were there for me in that moment, because my husband has been there for me. I could cry. In my heaviest, darkest moments, our entire relationship has been built on him being there and helping me to feel safe as I go through some of the most difficult things in my life. The courage and bravery of this man to enter into my life when everything was falling apart really shows his strength and his quality. And so we're not going to go into that quite yet, but it is just a fun little whisper of where my life will go. And look, this was really hard. My mother passing, I went home after that summit, and I went home alone. And because of COVID, I came back. I had to be in quarantine for 14 days. So I was alone. I lived in the middle of nowhere in the forest. And so I was alone in quarantine. When my quarantine broke, less than a week after my quarantine broke, I got into a car accident that totaled my car. And this is where I invite you to be very careful with the prayers that you put out. Because 2 days before I put out this prayer, I said that I needed money, the exact amount that my car was worth. 2 days after I put out that prayer, I totaled my car. It's raining. I was going too fast. I'm in back roads in the middle of nowhere. I'm lucky that someone saw it. I'm lucky that nobody else was hurt. But as I lose control of my car, I am moving in slow motion, and I just hear God. Take a deep breath, relax every muscle in your body. You are going to be okay. You will not be hurt. You will not be hurt. Just relax. And so I'm being coached by the voice. Just relax, trust, don't worry, everything will be okay. While I'm spinning, hitting trees, and then go backwards into a deep ditch. After I was done spinning and my car stopped, I sat there for a good 5 minutes before moving a muscle. Am I okay? I had my glasses on, my glasses flew off. I couldn't see. Next thing I know, there's somebody yelling down at me in the ditch saying, are you okay? I was perfectly okay. But my car was not. My car was totaled. And so what ended up happening is the 2 months after my mom died, I was in absolute isolation because I lived in the middle of nowhere. I had no ability to get around. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't see anyone. It was just me and God. And this was a blessing. I had said when I broke up with my boyfriend, I said, I just want to be alone. And it was given to me. I was alone for 2 months in the pits of my grief, trying to carry and hold all the things because I had people in my containers. I still had my business. I was trying to show up for all the things that I had been in agreement with before my mother passed. I was trying to keep it all together, but I was watching the threads start to unravel. I was seeing it start to fall apart. I was not being the version of myself I knew I could be. There was stuff that was bubbling up to the surface. And not only that, because I had been channeling this collective of guides, while I was in isolation, I was walking in the forest because I lived in the forest. So every morning I would get up and I would go into the forest for a few hours. So I'm walking in the forest and I'm connecting with God. And God says to me, from now on, I am your only guide. And I felt God push out of my field anything. I was now to only be in agreement with the one note, the one consciousness. There was not going to be any extra interference. It was just me and God from that point forward, whether I liked it or not. And I resisted this because every Friday I was doing these events online, channeling my guides. After God said that to me, I started to lose my connection with my guides and I couldn't channel in the way that I had been. And I was not about to channel God. That was foreign territory for me because my guides would actually speak out of my mouth. Cecilia would go away and I would just be channeling these guides. When God came through and said, I'm your only guide, well, now I have to do this totally different. I can't do it the way that I had been doing it. So my whole life fell apart again. I had to stop channeling these guides. That was no longer in accord. I could feel it in my body. Honestly, for a while, I had been feeling it. I just didn't want to accept it because people were coming to these events. It was something consistent. It was the way that they expected. People come to me and they ask, can you ask your guides this thing or that thing? And I've been feeling, I'm like, nah, it's not. This isn't how I'm supposed to channel. I mean, they said this to me in the beginning. I was actually very sad when God pushed out my guides because they had become friends to me, working with these beings, these beautiful, etheric, mystical light beings, high frequency, very wise, very supportive. They helped me a lot. So when God pushed them out and said, it's just me and you, I grieved. I grieved and I resisted it. The very last session that I did, channeling those guides, the words were coming out so slow. It was very uncomfortable and very awkward. I should have canceled it well before all that, but I was in a weird place. Let's just be real. With everything that was happening in my life at that point. So at the end of 2020, I got on a plane to Austin, Texas. Because of the Fit for Service community, everyone in Fit for Service flocked to Austin, Texas during COVID. It felt like a place where you could go and not be inundated with what we might call the agenda. Everyone that I knew in that community was going to Austin. Everyone's going to Austin. It was like an exodus. So I thought, well, whatever. I'll go to Austin. I'll see what's there. I'll go for a few months. We'll see what happens. I arrived in Austin December 18th for a quick trip. I didn't even pack up my apartment. Thank God I brought my cat with me. Some intuition said, don't leave her behind because I would not go back to Canada for 5 years because I couldn't leave the country. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in the next episode, the next few episodes. I didn't know that. Not on a human level anyways. I think on some level my soul knew. I mean, the way that I was leaving, I remember just a few days before I left on that flight, I was sitting in the forest and I was weaving this anchor point in the middle of this pond, one of my favorite ponds in the middle of the forest. I was weaving this anchor point and saying, I'll always have a place here. A piece of my soul lives here, as if I wasn't going to come back for a while, even though I only had a 3-month visa. I could only be in the US for 3 months. I didn't know how I would stay or if I would stay. I had no idea. I just left. I think we're going to leave it there because the next part of the story is very special. Because because my life really changed coming to Austin. It has been so healing. It's been so healing. I feel coming to Austin, giving myself so much space from what I once knew has given me the opportunity to actually become who I was always meant to be and to be surrounded by community, the community that I'd come to love so much. Fit for Service changed my life. And that's why in the last episode, when I said that Aubrey Marcus changed my life, it wasn't because he did anything. I don't even feel, on some level, I'll always be grateful to Aubrey for creating Fit for Service, but it wasn't Aubrey that made Fit for Service so special. It was the people. It was the environment. It was what we all cultivated together. I don't even feel Aubrey had much to do with that at all. He was just the one that said, we're going to do this thing. So I don't really feel that it was necessarily Aubrey himself that changed my life, but the choice to lean in changed my life and so many other lives. It's just undeniable. He did so many of us a solid. We found our soul family. It brought us together in a time of need. It brought us together in a time of uncertainty. And that was huge. Huge. So I'm going to leave it there. I've now landed down in Austin. I left my home, which I loved. I loved my home. The home that I was living in Canada before I went to Austin was truly a manifestation of my deepest desires. I always wanted to live in the forest. I lived in an actual village. It wasn't a town. It was a village. It was small. I could go walking through the forest every morning for hours. I could go to the lake. I could go to the river. I could go to the ocean. I could go to the mountain. It was all there. This was a dream. And it was exactly what I needed in the year after I blew up my life. It was so grounding at a time when I needed it. And one of my best friends owned the house that I was living in. And so bless her forever onward for giving me the space to be in my mess and my chaos and to figure things out. I was not the most grounded version of myself, but to be in the forest and to be surrounded in that space was so beautiful. So I didn't want to have to leave. I remember there was this one day I was in meditation and I was sitting there and the divine starts dancing around me and says, you're going to move. I'm going to move. Yeah. And I started to see that I would have people, like soul family, all around me. So many people around me. And I remember asking, am I going to be in a commune? Where am I going? Didn't tell me where I was going and confirmed that it wouldn't be a commune. No. You'll just be within driving distance of people that really see you. You're going to have people around, just like you've been asking for. You're going to have the community right there to support you on this next phase of your journey. And at the time I said, okay, yeah, this was probably in August or September 2020. I didn't really know. Okay, just tell me when and where and I'll be there. And even when I went to Austin, I didn't know that that was what I was agreeing to. I just went. It felt like the right thing to do. I didn't want to be alone. I was all alone in the forest by myself. Up until that point, I had had my boyfriend with me. But then when I came back from the US after the Fit for Service Summit, I came home and I was alone. After 2 months of being alone, although I had asked for it, I realized that that actually wasn't healthy for me, especially in my process of grief. And so I actually needed to get back in with community. And so the only answer I could find was, I'll just go to Austin and see what happens. So I'm going to close out my story there. I'm excited to share the next part of the story. I feel this next leg of my story, it's so perfectly balanced with beauty and tragedy and realization and healing. And oh my God, this is what I've been holding. Fuck. It's a very full spectrum part of my story where things start to both come into alignment and also unravel. The things that had been weighing me down finally come up for me to be with it all. And I had all the tools. This was the cool thing, is after my mom died, because I had spent so many years cultivating all of these tools and learning meditation and movement and breath and all these things. When my mom died, I was given an opportunity to apply everything that I had learned, everything that I had been receiving through my channel, everything that I had been seeing, even things that I had been teaching other people that I had been integrating myself. I was now put in a corner where I had to do it myself. In fact, there was no other choice. I couldn't even help other people until I applied it all to myself. I got to pull it all back in to me and turn it all inwards and go through a major process of transformation. So I'm going to share that with you in the next episode. So thank you, as always, for being here with me on this journey. Again, I remind you, I'm not always just going to be telling my story. What are we at, 20? 2020, 2021 now. I'm going to get you up to speed on where I am now and how I am this now and who I am now as a result of all of this and getting you up to speed. And then we're going to fuck around and find out, right? I'm excited as much as I know it's necessary to have this story recorded and to share it so that you know who I am and why I am who I am. I'm excited for the era where we just get to be doing episodes, you know? That's going to feel really good. So you get to see who I have become through this. And what God has been saying is show them what I have made you. I'm excited to show you what God has made me through this. Okay. So next week, I'm going to tell you about my journey with healing the wound with my mother and what happened after my mother died, as well as what happened when I reconnected with a man who I would marry. The love of my life. Oh my God, I love you so much. Where life got really good and really bad all at once. Yeah. Okay. Thank you again. I'm sending you so much love. Thank you for joining me. The Awaken Broadcast. I hope you're enjoying it so far. We're on episode 6. I hope that you're loving it. And if you are, please let me know. I want to hear from you. Okay. I will see you next time. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for the Awaken Broadcast. If this episode resonated with you, supported you, or awakened something within you, I'd love for you to subscribe or follow the show. Leave a review, share it with a friend, or drop a comment wherever you're listening or watching. It genuinely helps this work reach the people it's meant for, and I'm very grateful for that. If you want to go deeper, you can find me on Instagram at Awaken with Cecilia, Cecilia, or explore everything I offer at awakenwithcecilia.com. I've linked it all for you in the show notes, masterclasses, my monthly membership, and other ways to dive in. Thanks again for being here. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next broadcast. Until then, I'm sending you so much love.